I would like to welcome you to this webinar that is going to be about active learning techniques. And I'm going to start with, hopefully you will see this. I'm going to start with a short presentation of those of us who is going to be part of this webinar. And all of you are going to be introduced to each other later on in this webinar. But my name is Agneta Hedenström, and I'm a pedagogic developer at the Luleå University of Technology. And with me today is Oskar. Oh, you are muted.
All right. Hello, Oskar Jed. I'm a pedagogical developer at the department at the unit for academic development.
Mm-hmm. And then we have Diana.
Yes, I'm working at a subject called information system, and I'm working in this project related to hybrid education.
And Erik.
Erik Erfgren. I'm a teacher in energy engineering and physics, and I also do some pedagogical development. I am also the head of the task for student to teacher, and I will give a little bit of a preview of that also later today.
Thank you. And here you see the agenda for today. We want to start with giving you an example of an active learning technique. And of course, we would like you to be active as well. So we have Mural prepared, where we are going to work with your experience of active learning techniques and where we want you to introduce yourself as well. Then we are going to talk about the ICAP framework. A little it's a good framework to actually hold on for active learning. And after that, we have a break. And then Erik and Diana will give you some examples on how they work with active learning in higher education. And then it's going to be another mural where you are going to be active, and we are going to work practical with the ICAP framework. And then after that exercise, we're going to have a little bit of active learning and research and what the research is saying about that. And we end with a conclusion of what has been said during this webinar. And the aim and outcome of this webinar is that you will get examples of and inspiration to work with active learning in your courses and the courses that you are preparing for UNIVERSEH as well. Well, then I think I'm gonna leave the floor to Oskar.
Thank you. I will start before we dig into something heavy to digest. I'll just give you a short example. What were we actually talking about when we're talking about activate or engaging? So I'll just share two short examples of techniques we could use when we want to kind of change the student's mode from paying attention to more go actively processing and in relation to their prior knowledge. So one techniques that I quite often use to illustrate this change we want to do is to when I get the feeling that this is the moment in my lecture or in a work we are doing, this is the moment where I want to change the focus to more their connecting to their earlier prior understanding. I use this think, pair, share model, and I expect that most of you are quite familiar with it. and do it in different forms maybe. But it is that I ask students first individually, and that is important, of course, to think of a question. It could be whatever I share with you in a moment. And they know that they're in a moment, in a minute or in 5 minutes or whatever that is suitable for that kind of question. They know that they will start to negotiate their understanding with someone else in the room. It could be online in breakout rooms, or it could be in the classroom or in the group work, whatever. And they also know that that kind of discussion will be shared then in the classroom. And there is a lot of strong points pedagogically with this, and also to build trust in the room and so on. But as an example of questions that I use in this kind of, that is this 3-2-1 exercise, that they should think of 3 things that interested them in this presentation or in the thing they have been exposed to, and 2 things that they found unclear or hard to understand or grasp, and 1 thing that they would like us to continue to explore in one way or another. So that is actually 2 very short examples to use if we want to do what we are talking about, to engage the cognitive processes with the students, and for them to engage prior knowledge and reconstruct them in a new way. So that was a short example of what we think is illustrating active learning techniques.
Thank you, Oscar. Then I think, Erik, you are going to introduce us to the mural and the activation of all of it.
So now you can hear me as well. That is always good. So in the spirit of activation, we will use a Mural, a collaborative tool to work together on this. And I will soon give you the link so that you can move around on this yourselves. But first, I wanted to say that I gave a presentation of how to use Mural in education in the workshop we had on tools, so software tools that we could use for this, and that will also soon be available on the website. But it's pretty easy to use this. It's a sort of post-it system with a little bit more, but the thing you need to know is only about the post-it. You go to the site that I will give you soon, and then you enter your name, and you can put post-its by double clicking. So, and I want you to make a post-it with your name, where you come from, and what discipline you are in. So here at the top, you see the questions, first questions. So name, institution, and discipline. And then in close proximity to your name, you can answer or think about these questions and put up how you are using active learning techniques, or how you would like to use these active learning techniques. And also think a little bit about, is there any of these that you would like to discuss further with the others later in this workshop? You can zoom in and out with the mouse wheel. You can drag this thing around by clicking and dragging. So it is pretty easy to use. Many tools these days use these techniques. And I think that is all you need to know for the moment. So I will share you this link and put it in the chat like that. And so present yourselves and write a little bit about what you have tried using for active student learning techniques, and or what you would like to try to use. And if you have any questions, feel free to just ask away, either in the chat or orally. you can also undo things. There is an undo button on the top of the screen which looks like an arrow rounded backwards. If you accidentally erase someone else's poster or something, post it. Has anybody had any problems getting in and getting it going? Now there are about 4 minutes remaining of this part of the workshop. Then we will continue with the ICAP system. All right, so I can see that there has been a lot of activity on the mural, and I also see that most of you have some prior experience. Some have a lot of experience working with active learning for students. And we will return to this mural in a little bit and discuss together about what we can do to improve these things in our courses. But first, we will have a little more theoretical presentation. So I leave the word to Oskar Gädda.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really inspiring to see all of the techniques or philosophies rather than that we are using, and we can see that we are quite experienced group. Also see that a lot of you have experience of using peer instruction, which I think it's interesting, and I want to learn more how to develop that to disciplines that are not traditionally using peer instruction. So I will just, as a support of thinking of active learning, we want to kind of engage the students. So the problem is, and one of the reasons why we have this behaviorism in the 1960s and earlier, is that we wanted, that was the thing we could see. We could see the behavior of our students. So I want to share a model and a framework that is called the ICAP framework. I don't know if you you could just make thumbs up if you are familiar with the framework ICAP. And Agneta, could you help me to see, because I'm not can't view all of the participants for the moment. So, are you familiar with the ICAP model?
About half.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. So then this will be a short recap of that. But I think that is actually something we could support and help our colleagues to develop a language, what we actually try to achieve when we're talking about active students. So the model, for you that are not familiar, it's divided into 4 modes. They say, in a way, that we talk about a passive mode, we talk about an active mode, we talk about a constructive mode, and an interactive mode. And that is what kind of behavior, what kind of observable behavior that students perform in a learning situation. And I will explain and try to present my interpretation of that model in a moment. But I just start to share why I like this model, what I think is the strong part. And it's the first one. It's quite easy to grasp the idea. It's quite visual. And it's easy. I have done that on conferences with a lot of people, just giving them an idea in 3 and 4 minutes. And then a lot of people told me after that this was the first time they kind of made the first grasping of active learning when I tried to put them into these 4 modes. I also like the thing that it has quite clear assumptions. And by that, I mean that even if it's the observable behavior of students, they don't claim that is what's happening in the brain. And that is one of the dilemma all the time for research and for more in-depth knowing of learning activities. So what they claim is this next one. They claim the connection, that we could assume that there are a connection between some kind of behavior, and that is probably more think about that connects to some kind of cognitive engagement, and that is then connected or argued from a theory of knowledge change process, and that could tell something about learning outcome. And there hypothesis is actually that if you're going upstairs, so to say, you increase the learning outcome. So that is the acronym then why interactive is bigger and more powerful than constructive. That is more bigger and powerful than active and over passive. So if we then try to think of the different levels, how could we understand these levels? So if we start with passive, and I want to stress that passive do not mean that they are not paying attention, because that is kind of zero level. They are talking about they are actually paying attention, but the students are passive. They are receiving some kind of information. So what I do in this moment, I am orienting my students towards a phenomena or towards information I think is important for them. But the definition is still that they are not doing anything observable about this information. So they are, as a teacher, I just see that they are listening. So that could say in my point of view, just listen to my voice, just listen to my words. That would put the students into a passive mode. They are still paying attention. The next level is if we could bring them into an active mode, so to say. And when we have brought our students into active mode, we have caused them to more focused attention. We are creating that they are taking notes and notes of important words that I say, or highlighting in an article, or discriminating parts of an article that are not useful. So they are kind of bringing out the information that they think is more important, but still they are just working with the information that are presented to them. They do not bring anything to that information, so to say. So they are active. That is still quite low engagement level. And if we then try to help students to be, now we're taking a more quality step in my point of view. So we are trying to help them to be in a constructive mode. This is the mode where we help students to generate or produce some additional output or product that goes beyond the information that is provided. So what happens in this moment is that students are negotiating the new information with the prior understanding and start to reconstruct their prior understanding. So, and by that, reconstructing a new understanding or conclusions, or formulating an important question is also to go beyond the information or the conceptual knowledge that they have received in the situation. So the qualitative step is actually that we help students to bring the information, connect and reconstruct the information into their own contexts and the meaningful idea of that, how to use that information and make it like a useful knowledge in the situation. And the next step is interactive. And the interactive level is based on this concept, the most powerful and the highest level of engagement. That is when students are in a dialogue with each other, and to be in a serious interactive situation, there are two things that need to be accomplished, and that is that both students or partners, participants, are sharing their constructive level, so to say, that their utterances must be on a constructive level, that they share the understanding they have made out of the information, and also that they don't just share that information between them, but I share my understanding or my question, and you need to answer by using your understanding and my question to go beyond our common understanding for the moment and share a new understanding. So we need each other to create what we are not able to do in our own. So I had this question that, could I be in a dialogue with the text? Because we often say that you can be in a dialogue with an author of an article and so on. In this model, I would say no, because you are not. You could put out your constructive questions, but you could not use the others using your understanding to give you a new question, so to say, so that the text will not respond based on your understanding. That's why I think that it's this interactive mode needs actually human beings to work. And I also think that this is very important when we sometimes meet students that say, I want to work with the teacher. But if we are in truly interactive mode, both students will learn from each other and create something that they are not able to do on their own. And that will probably help them to understand the power of this exercise. So if we just try our own understanding and of this model, and we think of that activity that we mentioned before, the activity of think, pair, share, you could write in the chat, at what level do you think that activity, think, pair, share, at what level in this taxonomy of passive, active, constructive, and interactive do you think that will kind of fit in? Or do you think it fit into different parts of this taxonomy, or is it other questions I need to figure out to answer the question? So we have think is on C level, constructive, and pair is on interactive, and Eric is active and interactive. All right, more suggestions? Depends on the question. Jean-François, could you
yes.
just, yeah, welcome.
It depends really on the question you ask. For instance, if you ask for a recall question, for what is the capitals of the France, it's Toulouse or maybe Paris. Yeah, it's not constructive. It does not go beyond the material that has been presented. It does not generate hypotheses. So really depend on the questions.
Yeah, so I really agree that the way we kind of design the question will help students to go from constructive to interactive, but we could also kind of limit the students that they may not even reach constructive because we actually do not ask them to kind of go beyond the information. So what kind of questions have we helped the students to work with? And also the competence of students when they meet and start to be, even if the question could help them to be on the interactive level, it's not sure that they will do that work and expose themselves to be maybe being wrong. Or if you are in a higher status than I, or I believe that you know the subject better, maybe I will not kind of give you my opinion. I will try to say something that is untouchable and not able to kind of question from you and ask for arguments, so that maybe even if the question helps them to be on interactive, they will stay actually just sharing their constructive level and not kind of using the other person's understanding to create. Yes.
For instance, if the question is too easy, it's not good to be share or pair, because there is no point to discuss and to debate. Just an example of what
Yeah.
you say.
Yeah. So that I think that is interesting, that we could say that we have helped the student, we have made some kind of affordance for them to actually go from active to constructive. Instead of listening or taking the input, we turn them into their own thinking, and then we help them to be in pairs. But then how we have designed the question, what kind of question, and also the competence of students and trust between students to go into the interactive mode and really explore their knowledge and maybe the knowledge they lack, so to say. So that is a way we could talk about how we then design different activities by using these levels of engagement, but also to figure out if the exercise doesn't work on interactive level. We had the feeling that actually they have answered on a constructive level the thinking they have made out of their own reading of the article or their own understanding of that lecture or whatever. We need to think what is necessary to be in the interactive mode, so to say. I think we will go to this one. The first thing I want to say is, because we sometimes talk about is passive a desirable mode of learning or not. So I want to just start the 0 level, that passive is still paying attention. So we have the not paying attention, that is kind of out of the question in this taxonomy, just to be clear on that point. And then some kind of qualities and problems when we talk about this different levels. If we are, and you are of course allowed to complete or put in your understanding, but when we are in a passive mode, when they are listening, they kind of memorize that information as that information, so they do not connect that information in a larger extent to their prior information, prior knowledge. They just listen and kind of listen and learn. And the problem with that is, if you change the context in the assessment, they will have problem to recall that kind of information, because it's the key to reach that is the format that they kind of stored that understanding, that information. So that one of the kind of problems with passive learning is that we also decide the moment when they could use that information, and that needs to be quite similar to the situation they have learned it in a way. So the difference to active, when we go from passive to active, is actually in active learning. Yes, Jean-François.
No, just to complete what you said just slide before, but so it's this example is for people after the workshop. It is an example of a teacher who tried to convince students to really discuss between interactive mode. So it's not sorry, but there is a delay between my comment, and your talk.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So when we go to active level, what happens, what the difference will be, that is actually that they integrate with their earlier understanding and connect it to some kind of understanding into their own, so to say. And by that, they could also apply the information in a better way. But the biggest differences is when we go from active to constructive, because in constructive, we asked or demand the students to go beyond the information and create and generate some kind of conclusions or understanding that are not presented to them, so to say. So they need to bring that, and that helps them to also to transfer the information, transfer the knowledge from different situations, so they could because they have figured out what is actually the meaning for me, and then they could use it in a context that they are living into. And there is a lovely video about talking about YouTube. There is a lovely I don't know if it's true, but it's still Eric Masur telling the students in an example of when they have been calculating in football's examples, and then they change because the teacher gives them another context, and they don't believe that they could solve that problem because it's not in the football context anymore. So they are kind of limited in the context where they have learned it, and that is what we want to achieve when we go to constructive, to help them to put that knowledge into work, into their own context, so to say.
Oscar, yes. I think we're kind of over time now by 5 minutes. So,
all right, so we will have a break in 1 minute. So the last one, co-inferring, that is when we negotiate the information, when we need to argue our own understanding and defend our own understanding, but also listening and understand why you have interpreted the information or the knowledge or the way we should do this work or calculation in another way than I did. And that also enhance the possibility to actually to co-create and work together. So that's why we want to bring them and also have this interactive mode of learning. So now I think, Agneta, it's time for a short break.
Yes, 10 minutes break, so we are back at 5 minutes to 3, 14:55.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Oscar,
Oscar is here still.
Yes. So, Eric, if you just maybe I use the ICAP framework with your teacher, and maybe you are interested. I can share my experience with that. And the first point, I see that the names they use, interactive, constructive, active, passive, are not really good. In fact, the verb she uses, manipulating or receiving, is really clearer. And because passive is not passive. So when I use it to with teachers, I use the verb receiving, constructive, generating. Generating is really interesting as a good noun for describing.
Yeah. So I jumped a table. So I agree that is, I don't know the name they have on that, because that is a perspective of these, because the passive constructive, that is the overt behavior, and what you say is I think that is
cognitive engagement. Yes,
cognitive engagement. Yeah. So that could be useful. So what we could agree upon is that the article is worth reading.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the next article is easier to read, translating the ICAP framework into practice. So this one of the same authors is easier to read and to share to teacher or people interesting.
Perfect. I will look into that one.
Yes. And also, it's my own experience, but I don't know personally. I do not talk about active mode. I only talk about receiving or generating because it's not clear what they manipulate. Because there is a confusion between active learning, hands-on, and head-on. There is this confusion, so I don't want to well, it's my own experience. I totally agree with your choice of ICAP, of course.
Yeah. But I agree, and I think that is in the article also the problem, that we are kind of in higher education, we are talking about active learning, and then they have a category that is active. So they kind of try to differentiate their category of active from this active of being active, and I totally agree that is that is sometimes making a little fussy to understand what are we actually talking about. But I think that still the point is to help the participants to understand that just asking the students to take notes and bringing out the important words or actually highlighting will help them to take one step, and it's so small things to do. So I agree with you, and I understand that the point, and I still think it's important to show kind of the model, so to say.
Welcome back after the break. Hopefully everyone is back. Could we get a thumb up if you are back to see, so we don't, yeah? There's a lot of people that aren't back. 3, 2. Victoria is back now.
Me too.
Yeah. And Barbara is back. And Jean-François is back. Oh. But maybe, yeah. Welcome back. And Hassan.
Yep.
I think we are that we start again now. And I'm going to give the floor to Diana to talk about how she works with active learning in higher education.
Thank you. Yes, I just want to give you 2 examples. It's nothing really new. I think you all maybe heard it before, but some details of how I think. Let's see, I will share my screen. And the first example is related to a research methodology course. And I use active learning here with the focus on for students to gain a more deeper knowledge about this research methodology, which they are then using in their thesis work and in an examination assignment in the course. And this is a course that often are quite tricky for students because there are many concepts and many this about ontology, epistemology, and it's really strange words. But it requires that students work with the different topic and the content, and to have different assignments and apply the different concept and reflect. So what I show here on this picture is just in the middle here, the course structure. It's 1 week between the gray here, and it's built about iterations. They read a chapter in the course literature, they see a recorded lecture if they want, and then the main work is to work with assignment, individual group with a topic, and then we discuss this on a seminar. And they work in groups, they show summary of discussion, presentation, and they share experience. And here it's really important that they have some knowledge, they have some understanding, and then they exchange this in this seminar. And we work with different interactive tools with us online. And here is just one example using Padlet. And here is about different research strategies. And here we see that different groups have put in from the design what they've discussed about this assignment, and they discuss in groups, and then we discuss it together. And so this require, of course, active students, and it's much more easier, I think, when we have students on campus. But those on distance, disadvantage here is that when we use digital tools, they can just drop out when there are discussion and interaction required, comparison to campus students. So here is the need of netiquette. So this is one example. Another example is case methodology, which is very much focused on student-centric, or it's a student-centric method. And here's the example when I use case methodology. And it's problem-based, and they apply theories and models in different contexts related to companies. They sort out what is the problem for a company, and they argue what the cause of the problem and what can be done to solve the problem. And for this, they use theory and different models. Also here, they read dedicated chapter in beforehand, and they can also watch pre-recorded lecture if they want to, which give them a base of theory and models that they can apply in their analysis. And the time with the students are really put in the seminars, and there is a focus on discussion and that they exchange different possible analysis of the cases. And what Oscar said in previous about this ICAB, not all information is given. They have to make assumption, they have to gather other information, and I as a teacher coach and of course put in some extra questions to make them advanced in their thinking. And there also, when we have students on distance, of course, we use this digital whiteboards, and they can come up and make their presentation here, which we then later discuss and share also with us on the campus. And this course is also built in iteration, that read and listen to pre-recording. They are active and work with the assignments. The main purpose here is also to exchange of ideas in groups. And then we have an examination that they reflect on the concept and theories, so that they really make from different angles and different perspective on the theory and models that we are in focus for one. We have the two every week, two different topics. And of course, we can also use digital tools for putting up from different students, that they put up their thoughts in their own work and different questions here, and then we can get an overall picture of where they are in different works, what do they need to highlight, and other students can comment on this, what they put up in these digital whiteboards. So this is just very brief summary of two of my courses using active learning. Give the word to you, Eric.
Okay. So
Before Eric, is there any questions to Diana right now? Feel free to ask them. Okay, Eric.
okay. So share my screen. And just as Diana said, the new things, but just a couple of examples of how I use active learning for students. I will first present one course, energy efficient buildings, do some research on a topic that interests them, and then they present this during short presentations together in the mini conference. They can also see what topics were chosen last year, so that they have some inspiration, but they are encouraged to try to find something of their own. And then we have the presentations. Since they are pretty short, we don't have a discussion after each and every one of them, but after a couple of presentations, we have a discussion of all of them, and also questions. And then I order some coffee and some sweets to make them feel like it's a real conference, and it's usually quite nice and a good add-on to this course. So if we look at the ICAP model and how this relates to this course, I would say that the research that the students do, that is definitely on the constructive level. They do something on their own and they sort of put it together and stuff. And then when they discuss it afterwards together with the others and answer the questions, that is the interactive part of the course. And of course also me as a teacher, I also give them some questions related to this. The advantages is that the students engage in the topic and that they teach each other on topics that they find new, relevant, and interesting. Some disadvantages is that the students don't listen as well as they could during these presentations because they are stressed about their own presentation that is upcoming, except for the ones who has already presented. But it's still usually quite good questions and also good discussions, but I think it could be even better if and I've thought a little bit about how you could do this, maybe pre-record something and then make it listen to them. That would make that problem easier. On the other hand, it's not the same thing as practicing actually presenting something live. So I have not come to a good conclusion here, except that the way I'm doing things now is at least one good way of doing it. And of course, it's only a short presentation on each topic, only 5 minutes. But since there are quite a lot of students, 5 minutes is quite a lot in total still. And this is an example of how the Minutes conference was a few years ago with the times, the description of the different student works. And these are the names of the students, but I have blotted them out so not to violate GDPR or something like that. Anyway, at the end of this discussion, since it comes at the end of the course, I have a written course evaluation and also an oral course evaluation where the students can present and discuss their expectations and criticism on the course. So that was my first example on the mini conference. Second example is in a much bigger course, Physics 3, with up to sometimes 500 students I've had at most. At the same time, that was when I was lecturing in Zoom last spring. Using group discussions is sort of the thing here. Unfortunately, group discussions with 500 students didn't work as well as I hope, but I can get back to that a little bit later. Up to 200 students, it works fine with Zoom. Traditionally, teachers try to engage students by asking them questions, but the result of this is often that there's only a handful of students who actually answer these questions, and it's the same students every time almost. Of course, it is possible to engage more students by sort of pursuing them more actively, but it's not always a popular way of doing things. So what I do is then that I ask challenging questions to all the students, and then I let them discuss amongst themselves in small groups or in breakout rooms in this digital Corona part of our teaching. I let them discuss quite briefly, only 1 or 2 minutes, discuss a question, and then I present the correct answer and I discuss it a little bit with them, and I ask if there are any questions that they have in this. In Zoom, you can also use the poll function, which is nice. I use this a lot when I had more than 200 students, because then I couldn't do the breakout room thing. So then I only use the poll instead. And also you can use the voting function in Zoom, yes or no, just to quickly get individual answers. A little bit like we did previously here. Are you back yet? Put the thumbs up or something like that. Or using the yes and no buttons in Zoom to get the students a little bit more active. One additional advantage of this is that the students, they don't feel as silly if they have a question. If they have discussed it a little bit firsthand amongst themselves, they realize that this was quite a tricky thing. So then they are not so scared to ask a question when they realize that, oh, others also have this problem. And if we look a little bit about the ICAP model, I would say that the challenging question is mostly active, but maybe constructive also when they try to sort of formulate an answer among themselves. When they discuss it, becomes interactive. Using polls, it is mostly to activate the student, but a little bit constructive as well. And having yes or no questions in Zoom, that is mostly just to activate. Of course, you can get some reflection out of it as well, but not so much. When I discuss the correct answer, that is, I would say, mostly passive, but since they have been engaging with the question previously, it borders on active, or even, well, at least on active when we come to this part. The advantages is that this is a very quick way of doing it. I don't have to wait for the students to get back to me, and someone maybe will answer, and then we get along. It's engaging for the students to discuss amongst themselves. But on the other hand, I get less verbal feedback this way, and also less other answers and questions. Of course, when I ask the question, I know exactly, I know what I ask, and the students cannot sort of answer or get another question back or something like that. So there are also disadvantages with this, but I think overall in big courses, this is a good way to engage the student in a quick way and activate them. And this is an example of such a question. We're talking about the nuclear power and the nuclear power plant, and we have the nuclear reactor here, and then there are 3 different water circuits, one for the high pressure hot water circuit here, and then we have a circuit where the water transforms from water to steam, and then the steam pushes the turbine to make electricity. And I asked them the question, why isn't the water sprayed directly on the turbines? Why do you need to have this system with water, steam, and cooling and stuff like that? So this is a way of engaging students and making them think about that. It is, of course, the phase transformation between water and steam, which produces the force, the energy that produces electricity through the turbines, in very much the same way as when you boil water or boil your pasta as a student. When you boil it with the pot closed, then it is much quicker, but it's also, you have also a risk of it boiling over because of this power that you have in the steam. So that was my 2 examples, the mini course and also the group discussions in the lectures. So any questions or comments about that? Jean-François, please.
Yes. Thank you for these 2 presentations. Just maybe comments for the first part, because when a student present and other students listen, and you ask them to give questions, and it's only very well that you say it's difficult to have students asking questions, even if you have some, and there is techniques to increase these. One of the techniques is to provide the student with models of question. I don't know if, yes, I can share my screen. It was tested in courses. So here are samples of, you see, questions that are already used, and students have only to plug and play. And so you give this framework to students, and for instance, ask them to put online in a shared document. Each individual should put 2 questions for the people who present. They write it. So you as a teacher, you can see that all students have made the job and have listened and have taken 5 minutes to ask good questions. They are helped. And if it's mandatory, if you give a grade for this, you will see that every student will do this, and you can pick and say, okay, here are all the questions. So you will have many questions. You can say, okay, let's talk with this one. I think this good one. This question from Matthias, who asked blah, 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 blah. So this technique of pre-made questions have been experimentally tested and give good results.
That's a good idea. Would you? So the students would then prepare them beforehand or during the presentations?
Just you need to give them 3 minutes just after. Oh, during.
Jean-François, I have a question to you. Lisa, is it your template or is it available somewhere?
Yes, have you written on the internet? I've got a Bloom taxonomy in question, and some guys have translated the Bloom taxonomy. It's not a perfect translation of the Bloom taxonomy. So if you have connective different type of question, simple question stems. Okay. Yes, this one. It is an example of but there are many other. So, and I have used Eiger author questions, not recall. It's not, and it was tested. It was used experimentally in another way. They put students in group of 4 and give 5 minutes each one to ask question, and they discuss in group of 4 each of the questions they ask. But it's not with a presentation, so with material courses. So for instance, they read an article, you give them, and they need to write 2-3 questions, and they ask in group of 3-4 of that question. And you as a teacher, you go from group to groups and make global feedback if needed.
Very nice. I think that we can continue this discussion very soon also, because we will split in groups now, 2 groups. Shall I take the introduction to this, Agneta?
Yes, you can take the introduction.
Okay. So we will return to our mural. Let me show you. So we will return to our mural. Now we were working on this left part previously, but now we will move to the right, and we will look at one of these examples that we provide. How can we make the students more active, or think about another example in our courses where we would like to have the students more active. And then if you look to the right of this, you also have the ICAP framework, so you can look at that to get some inspiration about how this works. If you don't remember exactly what Oscar was talking about previously, you have the ICAP framework to the right of this. So we have 2 groups, group 1 and group 2, and you can just as previously you use the post-it notes to you can also copy and paste your post-it notes from the left-hand side to the right-hand side to start off the discussions. And we will proceed topic by topic in no particular order. If you're interested, just ask the others what they think about something, and then we will have a collegial discussion about how to activate our students more. So that is the purpose of this second part of the mural exercise. And everybody still has the link, or do I need to send it again?
Could you please send it again, because I wasn't here at the beginning.
I will do that. So here comes the link again, and happy discussions.
Yes, I'm gonna pause the recording and send you out.
First one was this about minute paper. How could we improve the engagement in minute paper? And we kind of ended up in an idea that some exercises are not kind of designed or don't have the purpose actually to go further in the ICAP way of describing engagement. It's an individual part of the dialogue between the teacher and the students. I don't know if you want to add something. It was I think that is quite interesting, that the idea is not always to push everything higher just to become higher. It's rather to stay with what is the purpose with the activity. I don't know if you want to add something. I hope you have something to add. All right. Yeah, Jean-François.
And it's,
No, it was just if it is mini paper, if I understood correctly, we did a mini paper with the following peer reviewed by the students. So it was both interactive and active, and and it was very much appreciated by the students because it was their construction of the real situation when the students, further in your professional life, submit a paper.
Mm-hmm.
Wherever you do it. So it was quite good exercise.
Yeah. So I think we were into that a little of the possibility of using and discussing the outcome in different ways, but also to keep the eye on why do I do the exercise with the students to figure out what the purpose is about. We also discussed a little about how to help students and the teaching activities to go from passive to active in a situation, and the main issue we were into was to use this idea of peer instruction, where you ask students to kind of take a stand on their own and then argue between each other and see if they could change or understand the issue better by discussing between peers. So that was the two main activities that we were into.
And group number 2.
Eric, could you?
What did you discuss?
Okay, we discussed about we talked about peer instruction and collaborative workspaces and how you can use that to activate the students. We also talked about using mini conferences and the importance of creating a good atmosphere in those, so that the students feel that they are safe and that they are not getting criticized or penalized if they ask sort of stupid questions or something like that during these kind of presentations. And also we brought up the idea that also Jean-François presented here to have some template of questions so that the students can use them as a basis. We also talked more about project presentations and having presentations from real companies. Depending on if they do the project for a company, it is quite natural to have the company, for example, they are doing the presentation so that they can ask questions and come with comments as well. That makes it more real and authentic. We also talked about role playing, having the teacher act as a client or as an advisor during a project meeting, for example, and having someone officially approve their work. I think it was from outside the university, if I understood that correctly. Please add your comments and thoughts to my summary.
Otherwise, we can start to wrap this up. We have now discussed, or just briefly discussed, some examples here how we can create a learning environment and that activates and challenges and motivates our students. And this concept, active learning classroom, it highlights that we as teachers can design teaching that is varied and challenging, and where face-to-face teaching is combined with both synchronous and asynchronous tools. And as also we have discussed, it can be useful to combine, of course, traditional lectures and seminars with more interactive and collaborative form of teaching. And where students can get the opportunity to work with more complex tasks in form of scenarios, case studies, or problem areas where theories and methods are applied and tested. And of course, the context of the teaching is guiding us. But we can see that active learning is an umbrella term for learning and teaching methods that puts a student in charge of their own learning and through meaningful activities. And it's important that they think and about and apply what they are learning, and it's a contrast to this passive learning, which we have discussed is not only negative. Of course, passive learning is a kind of that we are listening and then try to reflect on it. And in addition, I just want to highlight that active learning can also be a good way of preparing students for future employment by training them to interact with activities like case studies and problem-based learning scenarios. If we integrate it in some teaching, and provides the opportunity for students to practice skills that are essential for work-class, not just the hard facts, that also this about more softer skills. So I leave it to you, Agneta.
Oh, thank you. And I'm gonna end this session with, but it's not working right now. Yeah, here. To talk a little about Kolb's learning cycle. And
Agneta, your view of us is covering half part of the screen.
It is.
We don't see it, but it's just black, sort of.
Oh, I put you like.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I didn't see that. Yeah. And I'm going to put Kolb's learning cycle into the perspective of makerspace, because I've been working with makerspaces for the last 9 years at least. So, and for me, when I started, it's clear that Kolb and how he thinks about the learning cycle, that you got some sort of concrete experience and that you reflect on this experience, that you got some sort of abstract thinking about it, and that you actually are trying or doing something about it, that you go from something concrete to something abstract at the same time as you are. And that could be, I think it was, I don't know who said it, was this brain level up, as well as when you go from observation to doing something, you got your hands on level up by feeling. In Makerspace, we talk about thinkering, that you think with your fingers and you can feel it and get the knowledge that way. And if you talk about the makerspace and you got something concrete experience for at least for a couple of years, it's been 3D printers. Their first experience and why they come to the makerspace is because they have want to see or use a 3D printer, or maybe one of our robots as well. But let's take the 3D printer. And they have a picture of how the 3D printer works and what you get out of it. And they come to Makerspace. We have a session where we show them what they can do, and they can see the 3D printer when it's when you have something made in it. And at the same time, we give them some sort of CAD program or 3D design program, so they can really do their own 3D, the thing they want to do in 3D. So at that time, they when they do this first exercise with us, we take something really easy, like doing their name to print out on the 3D printer. But this work really gets them to think. They got this abstract thinking. Oh, what can I do with a 3D printer? and they are using the program, they are coming up with new ideas, and sometimes their 3D object doesn't work because it's something that is collapsing, or they don't have anything supporting, so it's failing. And that's a good thing with a makerspace. We say that it's by failing you learn. So that's one part. You learn from each other, and it's really okay to fail, because you learn from that. So this is where you go around in this learning cycle. You can try the 3D printer again, doing something more on a higher level. You get new knowledge, and you try to do it again. That was a short experience about how this circle works. And I think that it's really important that you have in mind that when the students learn, they have to go from the concrete to the abstract. They have to get the knowledge in some sort of relation to what they have for experience, and what they want, what they really learn from it by feeling something, because I think that's important. Anyone else who wants to add something about Kolb? This is my experience of using Kolb in the makerspace.
I think that Kolb is interesting, or this experiential learning, and I think that a lot of study program have its kind of focus on different parts. So we have a lot of academic programs that have its focus on most the thinking and abstract, and sometimes we are asked to like CDIO, the CDIO project, where a lot of companies and some universities thought that we really need the students to work more into the problem and not that close to the academic disciplines. So I think that the Kolb concept is useful to figure out what are the focus in our education, how could we improve. So I also have been into art educations, and they are kind of quite heavy on the concrete experience, and maybe they need to strengthen the abstract part, or some teacher education maybe need to strengthen the experimental or the active part, how to design things and really try out. So I think this is, when we talk about active student techniques, Kolb is a nice way of how do the students grasp the idea, and how do they internalize that kind of knowledge into something, into their own context, and put that kind of knowledge into work, so to say. So I think it's a nice concept to lean upon when we design courses and study programs.
Anyone else who wants to? I have to stop sharing because I can't see it. Now I can. Are all familiar with Makerspace? Oscar asked. I actually didn't ask that, but hopefully you are, or otherwise it's Padlet, I know, down in Mural.
She kind of explained it, or you?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, you did. Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. Well, I think it's 8 minutes left of this webinar. Actually, I think we have reference list as well. Let's see if we can share it to give you.
It would be interesting to raise also, if we have questions, how to kind of go further or develop this kind of community that we need to create to help colleagues. How do we kind of work with our universities to enhance this kind of perspective, or actually basic understanding? So I believe when listening to you, I understand we have very different levels of experience, but still we have a lot of experience. So how could we go further? That is something that could be interesting to hear.
I would like to take the opportunity to also, if you want to further look into these kind of activation things, I want to recommend also the workshop that we will have on student to teacher, which is a sort of a sibling thing to this activation, where we use students as teachers. And one of my examples, the one with the mini conference, is actually just that students become active in their own learning and in their own also teaching each other. So we will have more information and discussions about that on May 26th. And if you are interested and you have not already got the invitation, I put my email address in the chat so that you can ask me, and then I will send you an invitation to this seminar on student to teacher, which is also a great way of reducing teacher workload at the same time as we activate the students and make them more engaged.
Jean-François.
Just a question here, I don't know, in the project, do we have a share space when we can share training material for teacher? Because here we are mainly experts and we are, so can we put resources in English, of course, in if you have resources to train your teacher to make active learning, can we share it? I don't know.
One way of sharing it would be to use the teams that we already have, but I'm not sure if everybody is already in that, Agneta. Probably not, since we are sort of mixing between different work packages here.
No.
But it's a great idea. Someone would have to look into that. Maybe work package 4?
That's already into the project. I think that we have a shared platform of sharing. So Agneta, that is something that there need to be information on isn't it?
Yes, I think they're working on Moodle as some sort of platform for sharing. Yes, I know they are working on that, but it's LTU that has some concerns that we have to look into before.
So we're still in the early phases of this UNIVERSEH project. So I probably with a little bit more time, it will resolve itself. A great idea.
But I think that one of the powerful thing is also the kind of the network we are doing now, because just sharing, but just putting up things will kind of be in the passive part of ICAP, so to say. There will be a lot of resources, but you need to kind of meet Matthias Miltz and hear a little how he uses that material to get inspired and be passing the work to actually try it on your own. So I think you have an important question also. It's, do we share the material on some platform, but also how do we actually share the material, not just upload it? Because that will be kind of a game changer, I think, for the project to really share the experience of using that resources. So I would really appreciate to kind of keep this network and names alive, and maybe when we upload also give the contact. This is, you could reach me and I'm prepared to share how I using this material and so on. Something like that, because I think that will change from a lot of resources to really a shared practice, so to say.
I would like to, I know we only have 2 minutes left, but what is the first short step that a teacher can take to make their course or their lectures more student focused or student active.
Repeat, please.
Once again, what is the first step that a teacher can take to make the course or a lecture more student activated or student centered?
I think that Franz brought up here this list about questions. I think that is a good first step to make students more active, to help
Yes.
them with questions.
I agree with it. I think the first step for teacher is to stop speaking. And to stop speaking for 5 minutes is good enough. And asking multiple choice if it's a lecture, but on open-ended question for small group, and start listening to the student think.
Yeah.
Well, another point probably, this might be different for different student audience, mentality of their student group.
Can you
Well,
explain it more?
because according to our experience, since we have a course mixture of the international students and their national ones, and then you ask their question, not their Zoom, but before COVID time, to the classroom, something, well, immediately you will get response for the international one students. Their Swedish students would like to ask afterward.
What I observe in French, in France, students do not spontaneously raise a hand, ask questions. So what I see, if I ask only a question and say, okay, do you have questions? There is no hand, there is no answer. And when I start to make multiple choices that I put in my slide share, on my slides, and when I say, okay, you have 3 minutes to think, and it's okay. So I stop talking, and I'm waiting. And this, when I saw a huge 80% of students answering before, okay. So.
But you can't wait for them all, because otherwise you will wait too long.
Yes, yes.
That's true. Yes, I think that was all for today. Thank you for participating in this webinar.